You are listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is Season 3, Episode 12, Brian. I'm your host, Haley Radke. Today I get to introduce you to Brian Stanton. We have an incredibly powerful conversation, but it includes some difficult subjects, including sexual assault. So if you're around kids, please make sure you've got your earbuds in. This was one of my favorite interviews of the whole year. And so I'm just going to leave the introduction at that. I'm not going to spoil anything, except that we are going to let you know when your next chance to see Brian's play blank will be. And we wrap up with some recommended resources, and links to everything we talk about today will be on the website adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. So pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Brian Stanton. Welcome, Brian.
Haley, so good to be here. Thank you so much. I see you here like it's present, like I'm in your presence, but we're doing this thing distantly.
We're very far away, yes.
I know.
But
so good.
I did get to meet you in person, which is not true from all my guests. So yeah, we met in Indiana at the Indiana Adoptee Network conference where you performed. It was such a great conference. You performed your one-man show, Blank, and I just cried and it was amazing. So we'll get to talk about that later. But yeah, so thanks for coming on the show. I'd love it if you would start out by sharing your story with us.
So funny. I never know where to start, like where the beginning is, you know? Because I think the beginning is when I started the reunion, but let me give some backstory because I think it would help where my mind was at that time and then where it evolved, I guess. I was born in 1975 in Kansas City, Missouri, and adopted through Catholic Charities. I'd always known that I was adopted. My parents were very open with me from the very, very beginning. It was just that way. There were no secrets or anything like that I had to deal with. I'm white. I was adopted into a white family. They were Catholic, and I went through Catholic Charities. So, most of the time that means that your mother who gave you up was Catholic, most likely, not always. I always tell people these days that I always looked the part back then. When I said I was adopted, most people didn't even believe me, which I didn't know how to take at that time. And I always, if my friends never believed me, I would go to my mom, my adoptive mom, and say, "Hey, Mom, tell them I'm adopted, right? Tell them I'm adopted." So that poor woman had to constantly verify the fact that I wasn't her biological child. Or the other reaction would be, "Oh my God, you're adopted? How do you feel about that? Are you okay?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Yes, of course I'm fine. That's just, I live that narrative. Everything's fine. Like I was given away for a reason, for my own good, right? That whole narrative. I just kind of lived that narrative for a long time. But my mom and father, my dad was a little more quiet than my mother, but they were always open with me if I ever asked questions. And to this day, my mom still says that I was always curious. I always asked about my mother, my birth mother. I always had this feeling that I would meet her, no matter what. I just kind of knew. I knew that day would come. And I lived in the fantasy world, the ghost kingdom, who my mother was. If I was thrilled about it, she was this beautiful Anne Bancroft woman who would come and save me from this miserable situation that I was in right now. Or if I was being positive about my adoptive family, then no. She was, she couldn't afford me. She was hooked on drugs. I mean, these horrible fantasies that we live and that we picture our first mothers as, just these fantasies, walking the ghost kingdom all the time. Anyway, but I always knew that someday I would meet her. I moved out here to Los Angeles, where I currently live, for graduate school for a theater program specializing in acting at California Institute of the Arts. and I went home for the holidays. And I was 23. No, 22, about to turn 23. Haley, that was 20 years ago, actually, from right now that I'm thinking about it. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is like the 20th anniversary of the upcoming reunion here. So I went home for Christmas. I was sitting in the kitchen with my adoptive mom and my sister. I'm sorry, I should probably say my my mom adopted me because she had a few miscarriages. Both my parents believed that they could not have children of their own, so I came into the picture. And then a year after, literally a year after, they were able to have a biological child. My sister came out. She's 1 year younger than me. And then had my brother 4 years after that. So I actually I grew up with a brother and a sister who were biologically related to my parents, which is very common. I hear that, parents not believing they could have a kid, so they adopt right away and then relax into it and have their own kids. Anyway, I'm sitting in the kitchen with my mother and sister, and my mom brings it up. Just brings up adoption out of the blue, information about my birth mother, asking if I was still interested. And then she goes to this cabinet, so to speak, on the wall, pulls out this folder with information, and gives me my original birth certificate. And this is important, actually, because in Missouri, I was adopted in Kansas City, Missouri, and that it was illegal. I did not have the right to my birth certificate, to my original birth certificate. Birth records were closed in Missouri. But a friend of hers worked in Catholic Charities at the time and made a photocopy of it and gave it to her.
Wow.
What an angel, right?
Right. Oh.
Now, I didn't know this. I didn't know it was illegal at the time. Anyway, so I'm looking at it, and my mother's name was on the birth certificate. And so my adoptive mother's just like, shall we call her? Should we do this? Should we look her up? And she looks her up, and she is literally in the phone book. Her name with her husband, we had her husband's name, was in the phone book right there. So my mom calls her in front of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, Mom, what are you doing? It was like I didn't have much time to process. And my mother is a very Italian, stubborn woman who will just do things, just do things. And she called her, and I'm literally like ducking under the kitchen table. Like I'm so physically frightened, which was weird. There were foreign feelings coming up, I guess I should say. And her son answered the phone, who we learned was her son. My mom is talking to him, where she is, where she's working, what's your name? And he said his name was Brian. So I have a half brother with my same name, which I learned is also very common. My birth mother did not know my adoptive parents named me Brian. So there's that synchronicity there that is very interesting. So I'm trying to process all this, and we learned that my birth mother works at a library in Kansas City, not too far from where we live. And my mom's like, should we go see her? I'm like, what? Like, yeah, let's go see her. And a huge part of me wanted me to see her, of course. But then there was a part of me that was scared as shit. Frightened, right? So of course we go, and my sister's all for it. Oh yeah, let's do this.
Oh sure. There's no impact on her.
Oh my gosh. So we drive to this library, and my mom goes, "You want to come in?" I'm like, "No, I don't want to come in right now. I don't want to come in." And she goes into the library, and I literally just like I hid under the kitchen table, I got on the floor of the car, under by the seat, and just kind of ducked. But my curiosity was so strong. I guess I just let my mom do what she wanted to do. I don't know. It was bizarre this whole day. Anyway, she comes back minutes later. It wasn't that long. And she said, I think I saw her. It's like, what? What do you mean you think you saw her? Did you talk to her? No, but I think I saw her in the back doing something. Like, well, what do you mean? And she said, oh, well, I talked to the main librarian right there at the desk and just asked her a few questions. My mom can do this. It's amazing. She'll just start talking to someone, asking questions. And then she said she was pretty sure she saw her in the back, but didn't say anything. Just got a look, I guess. Anyway, I was freaking out. Finally, this all ends with, well, Brian, let me know if you want to get in touch with her. And I'll do that. I'll call her up and I'll just ask her to write you a letter. Is that okay? Is that what you want? And I said, yeah, letter is fine. So I'll let you know when I'm ready. And that's kind of where we left it. And I went back to California, back to grad school, and I was ready. I don't know. I guess I just needed to process it for a few days, even a week. I think it might have been, I don't know, a couple days when I got back to California. I was like, all right, Mom, you can go ahead and make that phone call. I think I'm ready. And she made the phone call. She called me up and said, okay, I spoke with her. She's going to write you a letter. And so I was like, okay, and I'm waiting for it. I was in my acting class, which was a 3-hour class, and we have a break. And I went to the mailroom, and I see the letter with her name and the return address. And I started weeping. Tears in my eyes. I was shaking. A friend of mine was right next to me. She gave me a big hug. She said, whatever you need, what do you need to do? So we went back to the acting class. I told my teacher, I said, I need to leave. I'm sorry. And she's like, no, please go ahead. I told her who it was, that I was adopted. And this is my mother writing a letter to me. This is her letter to me right now. And she was totally the acting teacher. Oh my gosh! Well, would you want to open it and read it right here in front of our class? This is an amazing moment. You know what I mean? Like, no, I think
Actually,
I think I'll
no.
handle this by myself right now. So I go out and I go amongst these trees and just sit in the dirt, and I'm outdoors, and it was actually a gorgeous environment up there. And then I read the letter, and she basically says she didn't want to give me up for adoption, but she really had no choice, and she thought it would be best for me. And she said, I'll come right out and say it, but I was at a high school party, and I was gang raped by a few boys. Obviously, that's a lot to take right away. I was just sobbing audibly. I think I literally dropped the letter, Haley, and just walked. I just walked away, just trying to process everything, and what this means, and who I am, and everything that I thought I was, and all my fantasies, that were living up in the ghost kingdom of who my biological parents were, and what my life would have been with them, and all of that. What that means now when reality actually hits. I finally gathered myself and read the rest of the letter. And I needed people. I needed people right away. I think, looking back, one of the ways that adoption has emotionally affected me is I need touch. I need touch and connection. And I know it's because my birth mother did not touch me right away. They kind of took me away right. They took me away right away, which she expressed to me later. So I actually went back to the class. When you're in a graduate program, training program, acting training program, you're vulnerable for 3 years. I mean, you're naked, sometimes physically, but mostly emotionally. It's this group of people that you bare everything to. So you just go through this with them for 3 years. It's really hardcore. I can't fully put it into words what you go through, but I felt highly comfortable with this class of 10 at this time, and I needed them, and they comforted me. And I actually read them the letter. I was able to process it better with them around me. And then to top that off, the woman who I was dating at the time, who is now my wife, drove all the way up to comfort me. And Haley, I don't know about your reunion and stuff, but I cried uncontrollably off and on for probably 48 hours. And I didn't understand. I didn't understand why I was crying. I was just crying. I could be laughing and joking around with my, wife, who girlfriend at the time. And then all of a sudden I start crying. I started crying. All these feelings, coming up. Anyway, we get into reunion. We have that beautiful honeymoon period. I'll revisit the crying in a second. But I write her a letter, and then we start emailing each other. Then we have the phone call, and not only was her name real, not only were the words on her letter real, but then I hear her voice, and that's real. And then we meet. We met in Kansas City when I was there for, I think it was my brother's graduation at the time. And when we met physically, everything was so exciting. That honeymoon period when everything's so exciting, you're learning about each other, and, oh, you do this. Oh, I love that too. Oh, I love that music too. Oh, that's one of my favorite movies. Oh, we have so much in common, blah, blah, and when I see her in person, she couldn't stop hugging me and touching me and crying. And I didn't know how to take that either. Suddenly I was the adult in the room, and I felt like, no, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm great. You made a smart decision. I'm in this family now. I'm lucky, I felt like I was trying to soothe her because I didn't know where she was coming from. I had no therapy. I had no idea about any adoption support groups. I was coming in cold, living the narrative that I'd always been taught. My mother gave me away for my best interests. And I have a great relationship, especially with my brother and sister. We're very close. My mom and dad were close. We all have our issues, but for the most part, I've lived a great life, So I was coming to that narrative. I'm like, why is this woman sobbing and grabbing me and touching me? And I didn't know how to deal with it. We form a relationship. She comes out, visits with me in California, and even the questions, she's showering me with gifts, Haley. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't have to make up for your lost time. That's what I felt like she had to do.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I felt undeserving of all those gifts, which I understood later why I felt that. But I kept saying, you don't have to give me all these gifts, and you don't have to do all this. It's fine. I'm fine. I met her family for Christmas Eve, or it was a couple days before Christmas. Her whole family was there, and my wife and I went and visited, and the whole family was there. She has 7 brothers and sisters. She's one of 8. And so overwhelming. I hardly remember that night. I've blacked it out, I guess I'm getting at, I didn't understand where I was. And after a while, I pushed her away, and she said, okay, on your time. I'm sorry that I've been so forward. So then I write this play, and I'm introduced to this world of adoption. I go to my first support group a year after my first performance, and I'm like, what? You people are here and have these feelings? And I listen to the birth mothers and listen to everything that they're saying and listen to other adoptees. And I'm like, I understand now. I wrote this play, just being honest with myself and getting my feelings out there, and wrote this journey that I thought I was going on. But little did I know what I wrote. I didn't fully understand it till probably a year after I was performing it.
As you're sharing your story, I'm like, oh my goodness, this play was truly autobiographical. You're sharing all these different scenes, and these are all in the play.
Yeah, it's crazy, huh?
Well, just the search for identity, and I mean the things that you have this big canvas, or I'm not sure what it is, but with all of the different ways that we may find our identity.
Yes.
I can't think. Can you give a couple?
Yeah. No, that's a real outline that I was given by one of my acting teachers. It was analysis of your character.
Okay.
And so it's actually like 4 pages long, and I just take a little snippet of it, and it's word for word, and I put it on a tapestry that hangs in the hangs backstage, upstage.
And you wrote all of this stuff without ever talking to another adoptee about adoptee issues.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
See, because I have that in there. I found it ironic that I'm an actor, and I feel like I dive into these characters, and I know all about these characters and these human beings that I'm portraying. I know so much about them, but I don't know who I am. And that's what that journey is in the play, that as an actor, I thought that was an important point of view. Can I find out who I am by using your outline of an analysis of your character to find out who I am as well personally? And that's kind of where my show takes the audience. Yeah.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about that? I talked over you. You were saying that you kept a journal during that time, and
while it was going on, because everything was so new and foreign to me, all these feelings, I decided to keep a journal, and I kept it to the detail. I wrote in it every single day throughout the entire period, from when my mother gave me my birth certificate, all the way through my reunion, and every day, Haley. I kept all these emails as well that we exchanged, my mother and I, my birth mother and I. You know how they say, I'm going to go back to the crying thing. They say that, and I learned this through the birth mothers, but they resort to that time period again when they reunite with you. So when my mother saw me for the first time physically, she was 16 years old, and I'm a 23-year-old man. So I understand all that now, and I wish I understood it then. I think I would have handled it a lot better emotionally. But then I parallel that to me, because maybe I shouldn't say resort. Does that sound negative? The word resorting? Like
reverted?
I think back, reverted. Sure. Yeah. Thank you. When I saw the letter and her name, I went back to being an infant, to being a newborn, to being a fetus, right? Because the trauma that we experienced, we didn't have any language for, so we didn't understand it. So I think that's why they were such foreign feelings that were just exploding in my body. And why I was crying uncontrollably, because what do we do when we come out of the womb? We cry, right? And I must have come out of the womb again right there when I was seeing my mother's words for the first time, explaining everything. So I kind of equate my experience with that with my birth mother's experience, going back to when she was 16 years old, going through her experience, right? What were we talking about?
Writing. You were keeping a journal, and where I'm headed, hopefully, is the process of writing and performing.
While I was in grad school, I saw a one-woman show by a friend of mine named Joy Gregory, who's an amazing woman. She's actually a writer for television right now. I was just inspired by her. It had nothing to do with adoption. It was just her way of telling a very personal story. And I was like, I think I'd like to do a one-person show. And she's like, great. Some people do biographies, pick your favorite person or whatever and become that person. And some people do autobiographies, maybe a story of your life, something like that. And I was like, I don't know. I'd really have to think about a biography. It sounds kind of hard. A lot of work. What is that? And she said, well, you should think about an autobiography. Like, what's your story? And I was like, oh my God, I don't know. I don't have a story. I don't have a story. Oh my God, what does that mean? Who am I? I'm a nobody. Oh my gosh, I'm nobody. And I just was thinking about that for so long, but at the same time, I was going through the reunion and I had all this stuff written out. And finally, I realized, well, maybe that's my story. So I took that feeling of not having a story and being a nobody, and then all the stuff I had written in my journal, and I started to combine them. I mainly was writing, going through, what does it mean that I don't know who I am? What does it mean that I don't have a story? Who am I? So I just started asking myself questions. Who am I? And I started writing all these conversations and philosophical, ethereal conversations. And then on the side, I'd start typing out my journal just so I would revisit everything. And this was a while later. And I just was able to mold those two together, a journey in search of identity with the background of my adoption story. That's just kind of how I saw my play at the time. My final year at CalArts, I had a guest artist, a guest director as one of my teachers, and he heard about my adoption story, and he said, Brian, I'm directing a one-woman show right now that is about this. Would you like to come see it? And I said, yeah. He's like, it's down in Hollywood. I've been workshopping the play with her, and we're just doing one show in Hollywood. Come and see it. And so I came and saw it, and her name was Alison Larkin, and she did a play called The English American, where she was raised in London and found out her birth mother was from Tennessee, So it was a fun, great play, and that kind of boosted me to really start writing this thing. Anyway, yeah, so I got friends of mine to read and give me some suggestions. A third eye for the script. They would say, okay, I think you're saying this. Is this what you're saying? Because this is what I'm getting. So that was really great because I don't fancy myself as a writer at all. So to have somebody just go over my script that I can give to was really important and really helped me out to make sure I got my point across. Haley, I'd put it on the back burner, and then come back and write. Or I'd be doing a play, then I'd come back and write, then I'd leave it. So, the whole process took like 10 years, to tell you the truth, to really get it going. But when I decided I was going to do it, I looked for a director. I wanted a woman to direct it, to bring in the maternal, feminine point of view. So I think we balanced each other out really well. We trusted each other very much. She challenged me. She helped me rewrite sections. And it was something I told myself I wanted to do. I'm going to do it, fail or succeed, whatever it is. I'm going to do this. And then in April of 2010, I premiered it in Hollywood. I had planned to do 12 shows minimum. I ended up doing 18 shows in Hollywood for that particular run. It then took it to some theater festivals, some solo festivals, as well as theater festivals. And then I get a call from a woman named Karen Vetter, who was planning the Concerned United Birth Parents Retreat, which I know you went to recently, right? Did you go to the last one?
I did, yes.
Isn't it a lovely retreat?
Yeah, it's amazing people.
Yes. Well, she called me and said, I've heard about your show. You have a show. And I said, yes, I do have a show. I had tried to connect with adoption organizations while I was promoting the show, right? For an audience. That's just what you need to do. There are thousands and thousands of plays here in Los Angeles that go on, and you got to find some of a target.
Yeah.
So, of course, I reached out to the adoption, but I didn't know really what I was reaching out to. And I had a great meeting with Sarah Burns. Oh, my goodness. She kind of first opened my eyes that the birth mother's point of view. I was like, okay. Anyway, Karen called me and she said, well, we're doing a retreat. It's going to be September, October. I can't remember. But we'd like you to do your show at our retreat. And I was like, great. That'd be amazing. This is what I want to do with this. Talk to my peeps, right? and I said, but Karen, do you want to see the play first? I had no confidence in my play. And I was like, do you want to see the play first? I was nervous about going or what she was expecting. I mean, it's not a linear play. I wear a mask and, bring in the Greeks with it. I have Oedipus Rex in it. I have this avant-garde physicality in it. I say fuck in it so many times. I'm like, what are these people expecting? This isn't going to be a rainbowy type of play, So it's like, do you want to see it first? Which is not a good way to get a job either by saying that. But she said, well, yeah, I'll see it, but tell me about it, but she ended up coming to see it when I was performing it in Hollywood. And they said, it's perfect. It's perfect. Mm-hmm. Come and do it. And so when I performed at the retreat, at the Cub retreat, it was the first time I was in a room with 200 some odd people that were connected, that were all connected to adoption. It was a huge eye-opener. It was a huge discovery. It was a release. It was an amazing experience. I'm talking about me, not the audience.
No, I get you. But what were some of the things people said to you after? Were people openly weeping? And
yeah. Oh, yeah. I could hear them like during the play, which was really jarring at first, and but also moving for me because I'm like, yes, I'm feeling this here now too. So I think I started to become more open as an actor to the piece, rather than being skeptical as a writer while I was performing the piece, if that makes any sense at all. Yeah, so I held a Q&A after the show, and people were standing up and saying things to me, and then I'd be like, oh, that's why I wrote this line, and then one guy stood up and said, I have said this line that you said in the play. I was like, oh my gosh. So it just created this conversation and it opened up my mind to what I had created. So my art kind of surprised me in a way.
So often, when I'm talking to people about the things that they've created, and they're talking about writing it and going through the whole process and how that's sort of, been a healing journey for them. And it sounds like you're sort of started after you started actually performing it.
I did have discoveries while I was writing it, definitely, but not really on the adoption front. Well, Haley, everything I do, I think, is definitely motivated and is driven by my adoption story. I think that I've learned the last several years. I was working with a friend of mine. We pushed each other, Jay Sefton, a really good friend of mine, talented actor and great writer. We were like, hey, we're going to do this one-man show. We met every Friday. We shared our scripts with each other, and we just kind of motivated each other. Where are you right now in this? So that I had the bravery to actually put it up. And so while I was trying to discover some of these words, for instance, there was a scene in the play. It was actually towards the end. I have this. I present this internal struggle, this internal conflict, where there's a box, and I flip the box back and forth. I'm talking to myself, to my internal self. I kept asking, like, "What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of?" And I didn't know. And I'm writing the scene and I'm like, where is this scene going? What is the big thing that I'm afraid of right now at this moment. And I left the computer. I got in my car and I was driving to get a snack and, some green tea or something. And Pink Floyd was playing on the radio, which is a big influence for me. And it hit me. I was afraid of being a nobody because I didn't know who I was. And then I was like, wait a second, that's it. Like, I'm trying to understand who I am. I'm trying to understand my purpose. I'm trying to understand where I come from. All of this just relates to each other. And that ended up being one of the biggest, pretty much the climax of the play. So I did have discoveries. And I did discover that, well, adoption does have a lot to do with my identity journey and with all these questions that are coming. So I had that, but I didn't fully get how adoption has affected me until I heard from other adoptees, and especially the mothers, man, especially the mothers, really, really opened my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Are you in contact with your birth mother now?
I am. I'm a little. It's a tough time right now. It has been for the last couple years. It's funny, Haley. I was a little nervous about this interview because I really haven't spoken, had a deep conversation about adoption for a little while, probably since Indiana. And, I was so immersed in it for 5 years, and then I just kind of drifted away a little bit, and I was only doing blank a couple times, 2 or 3 times a year for the last 3 years. So I wasn't sure what was going to come out. It's like, where are my emotions about all this right now? So this is great. My birth mother has put the ball in my court completely. And I'm frustrated by that, really frustrated by that. And I've told her, I said, you can call me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I pushed you. I understand that I pushed you away at the beginning. I performed blank in Kansas City, where I was born, adopted, and raised. And I think that was a big turning point because I got a lot of publicity. I was in the newspaper. I was on the local news. I was on the local NPR station. And there were a couple things that really freaked her family out that was said, because it's a very personal play. And it was very personal coming out publicly about that. And it freaked her parents out big time, which in turn scared her. And since then, it hasn't been the same. There was a point where I said, you're not talking to me. I'm putting in all the effort. I understand you more now than I did then. Sorry, I didn't understand then. I get it. And I pushed you. I see how I pushed you away. I didn't know how to deal with these feelings. I didn't know how to deal with what I was going through, this roller coaster of emotions. I'm sorry, but I'm here. I want to be a part of your life. I want my kids now to be a part of your life. Please, you can call me too. I'm tired of having the ball on my side of the court. I need you to call me sometimes. She's like, okay. But she doesn't. I would call her after a time, amount of time, and or I would send her a letter, or I would send her pictures of, my wife and I send her pictures of the kids, and I never get a thank you. I never get a phone call. Hey, I got this, and it hurts right now. It really hurts. I called her to tell her some exciting news about my young daughter, a few months ago, and we hadn't spoken because she won't call me. But when we talk, it's fine. Everything is fine. She tells me everything that's going on. She tells me how she is really, it's just me doing all the work, and I'm tired. I want her to do it. I want her to call me on my birthday. That's where we are right now. It's been a big roller coaster. I was explaining the honeymoon period, and things are great, then things got a little rough, but then things were great again. And she saw my play, and it was fantastic. She saw blank when it was in Hollywood in 2010. She actually, I use an alias name for her, and she came out to the audience as her real name. And so I thought it was going to be great, and then just things turned after Kansas City. It just hit too close to home, I guess, and it's probably more. I don't know, but I want more. I'll probably see her when I go home for the holidays.
What's it like for you to put yourself out there in such a vulnerable position to the audience and the public? I mean, with your story and this piece, I'm assuming what everyone is super duper upset about is just the knowledge that you were conceived in a rape. And
Right.
Victims often have shame, plus birth mothers have shame. I mean, this is like...
Can you believe that? Can you imagine the shame that I know? And they don't need to have that shame. Yes. So as an artist, as a writer, as a sculptor, as a painter, whatever, you have to find it within you to not hold back. You have to find it within you to not care if you offend anybody. Otherwise, you start censoring your own voice. You start censoring your own story. You start censoring your own understanding of how you are presently in this world and in your own personal environment. So that's the first that's the first big step that you have to get over. And I was able to do that at the time because I came out of the hardcore theater training, where we wear our emotions on our sleeve and we're honest, and that's where it comes from. I did have it in the back of my mind I can censor later if I need to, but right now I'm not censoring myself. But then once it was out there, it was out there. Do you know? Yes. And then Haley, I've done a lot of weird shit on stage. I have done I have played a lot of characters. I've done crazy things. I mean, yes, from experimental avant-garde to classical to clean, fun comedy, whatever, but I've done it all. And I've never been so nervous to put that pen to the paper to start writing my story. But I pushed through it and did it, and then to have to perform it and embrace it as an actor, not only as a writer, but as an actor, was another big step. So yeah, it was hugely nerve-wracking. Hugely. It was bearing your soul. But, I told myself I had a story to tell. If people go for it, fine, but then that's what it was. And I became obviously extremely fortunate because people related to it. But I mean, I've received letters, emails, voicemails, how blank has affected people. But it's funny because some of the people that are closest to me, I drove away a little bit, or at certain points, because it hit them so personally. And I think I wrote down, and I wrote something for a publication or something, and I said, well, it's funny how I can really touch and get close to a stranger, but drive a family member away from me. Someone who I've been close to my whole life. My adoptive mom at first reacted, she didn't know what to think, but now she really appreciates it. And then it seemed my birth mother was really enjoyed it, but then pulled away a little bit. So yeah, it was interesting. It's a risk. Art is a risk. I mean, that's what art is. You take a risk and put it out there, no matter what it is. It could be anything, but you take that risk and put it out there. That's what makes it art. Sometimes you'll hear people say, "Oh, my child can do that." Well, your child didn't do that, and this person did that. They took the risk and put it out there for you to criticize it. That's what makes art. So I knew the risk going into it. I guess I don't know, but when you live it, sometimes it's harder than what you think you're getting into. So yeah, the play took me to places that I never thought that I would be. But I don't mean negative at all right now. I mean, this has been, I've discovered so much about myself. I've discovered so much about people. I've understood my parents more. I've understood both of my mothers a lot more. I'm a more whole human being because of it. And I'm not saying because of my play, but my play took me to a world that I didn't even know existed. And this whole world, these people have fulfilled me.
Well, the reason I asked you, it was kind of like, I don't usually do this, but it's almost on the personal side because
Let's do it. Let's go there.
well, doing the podcast, most of the time it's like 98% all about the guest. And I put a little bit of myself in there, a little bit of my story. But when I did the season 1 finale, I did share my reunion story. And I did censor a little bit because I was so concerned that my birth mother would hear. We had a 4-month reunion and she's cut off contact. And that was, over a decade ago.
Oh, Haley.
So I still reach out to her regularly and I just never hear anything back. But that is one of my fears, Brian, is that maybe she does listen. And is this the one thing that, is like, now she's never going to talk to me again, which she already doesn't talk to me. I was curious about that because you're right. Putting ourselves out there in this way, it's very vulnerable and we don't know how the people around us are going to react.
Haley, if she's listening right now, she is loving your beautiful voice, first of all. You have an amazing, soothing voice. I'm sure she loves you, Haley, and listening to you, who knows? She could just be listening in private right now and loving every minute of it. But whatever she is dealing with, she's scared to come back. I don't know. I'm so sorry. I'm fortunate that at least my mother will talk to me when I call, and so when I hear that, it breaks my heart. I'm sorry.
Thank you. When you were talking about your reunion and then how we regress back to and how your, birth mother was likely her 16-year-old self. And I'm picturing my first reunion or my first meeting with my birth mother and same, right? She was 15. And so, right? If we get stuck there, we get stuck there. And it's very hard to move forward without addressing these things.
I know. So is this helping you? Like you doing these interviews and interviewing all of us adoptees and therapists and is this helping you?
It's free therapy every week, man. It's awesome. especially when I interview therapists and they give me free therapy.
I bet. Maybe I should start a podcast for therapists.
Well, I am in reunion with my dad. And so that's almost 7 years. And that's like a great, healthy, good relationship.
Oh, Haley, that's great.
Yeah. So it's not like all doom and gloom with me, but
Right. Well, so it's funny because we always put the importance. I mean, the first thing that we think about is our mothers. There's nothing more powerful than the mother-child relationship, that mother-child connection. And I think that's why so many people identify with the adoptee story, because I would perform blank in front of people who had no connection to adoption. And I'd hear from them and I'd hear their personal stories, about their relationship with their parents, or their father left them when they were 6 and or their mother got sick and passed of some, it relates to a larger narrative of the mother-child relationship. I mean, it's in all of mythology, that's the connection, and blank. That's why I bring up Oedipus, which is the most obvious one, I guess. But then I think sometimes what gets lost is, well, what about the father? What does that say about who we are? And what does that connection mean? I personally past couple of years have actually wanted to put a face to my father. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to go back to the ghost kingdom, to the fantasy world, and my mom remembers two of the three guys, and knew their names, and one of them was in prison and was on the Missouri Most Wanted list, and the other guy was a cop. I mean, oh my gosh, talk about. Anyway, this is a whole nother story. We could do another hour about fathers. So if you do a season about fathers, I have a whole story for you.
I'm
Anyway, but
happy to have you back anytime.
but my point is so my fantasy land became a monster when it was about my father. My father was a monster. I had these monster fantasies, and that's not healthy, especially after I've gone through my reunion and gone through all these adoption support experiences with adoption support organizations. I'm like, I can't do it. I need to put a human face to it. So I was reaching out, and I talked to the guy in prison who ended up not being my father, which was a big surprise to my birth mother, because apparently I look like him. But yeah, I was going down that journey for a while. But the other guy, who's a cop, died, who could be my father right now. And Haley, there's a part of me right now, even though I'm on Ancestry, I'm on 23andMe, I'm on FTDNA, and I'm doing all that, hoping that there's going to be that one close cousin, that gets on, that I can for sure say who my father is. But either way, what I've gone through has humanized my father, no matter what bad choices he made in the past, has humanized my father, and that has put me at peace. And if this cop who passed away tragically is my father, then there's a point where I need to say, I need to bury you as well, and come to terms with that. If that makes any sense at all. I'm a father now, so I need to find that father within me and always keep it, right? So there's a part of me that says, well, I'm going to bury you for now. You are human to me, whoever it is that I'm speaking to. Of course, I'm personifying it through this man who passed. And if you decide to rise from the dead and somehow come into my life, whether it's through his kids or grandkids, then I will welcome that fully. But right now, I may need to bury that side and be and accept, what I experienced, and finally discovering a human side to him.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Let's just talk briefly about, healing through creativity and what being an actor is like for you, and being able to become these different characters. You addressed that a little bit earlier, but can you talk a little bit about that? And also with the view in mind of, the listener, and how often we're like, I'm not creative, or I'm not, but I feel that creativity is so important for releasing those emotions that we might not have words for, right? Like your uncontrollable sobbing when, you get this letter, and those kinds of things. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I oh gosh, where do I start? Yes, I'm an actor. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it's funny because no, it's a big part of my play for a reason. I'm an actor, and Haley, okay. Nancy Verrier punched me in the face, figuratively, not literally.
Oh, that would have been such a great story.
I know, right? So at this cub retreat, Nancy Verrier spoke. And so I'm, wrote Primal Wound. I'm sure every single one of your guests mentioned like Primal Wound, and
like 80%. Yeah.
I know. Okay. So let me add to that. So I'm sitting at Cub. It's my first, this was even before I performed, and my first time at one of these retreats, let alone any kind of support group or adoption family therapist, whatever. And Nancy was talking, and she was talking about the chameleon. Sometimes adoptees have a tough time ordering at a restaurant because they can't decide. Like they think there's a wrong answer, or they go into a museum and they see an art piece and they say, I like that, but they they can't fully explain why they like it because there may be a wrong answer with what they say. And then she starts talking about being in a room full of people and not, I'm totally paraphrasing here, okay? And this is how I heard it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Saying something wrong to another person and not gaining their acceptance, right? So the adoptee kind of takes on this chameleon nature and can size up a room and say, okay, this is who I need to be at this moment to gain the acceptance of these people. And I mean, the room started spinning and I like crouched over on my knees, breathing heavily. And this sweet young birth mother, like recent birth mother, I think she was in her 20s, leaned over and like started tapping me on the shoulder and said, "Is all this hitting home with you?" And I literally yelled, "She's talking about me, man. She's talking about me, man." It's like that right person to be, and that right thing to say, and because we don't want to be rejected. So obviously I'm revealing to you and our listeners that I was the pleasing adoptee, that I really didn't want to deal with rejection and had to please everybody. That's part of the reason why I'm an actor, because I know who I can be to be this character, right? And then B, I like being accepted. Do you know? That's where it has led me. So adoption has a big part of being why I became an actor. So every character that I do is an absolute blast. I love it. So that's, I think, why I became, an artist. But then when I wanted to tell my own story, obviously that was a whole different avenue. And we all have our stories, man. And
And yet, even in your play, you
Mhm.
play like a ton of characters, not just
Play
yourself.
characters, yes, and that
How
was purposeful.
many? How many?
Yeah, I don't know, like 11, including myself, something like that. Yeah, and I was very physical with it because I wanted
Yeah.
to, and I do have a slight exaggeration of all the characters that I played, and they're all based on people that I knew. A slight exaggeration because when I was just Brian, I just wanted to be as real as possible. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas all these other masks that we wear in other social situations are slightly exaggerated and slightly fake,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
what is the real essential Brian? And that's what I was hoping to somewhat gain from that piece, subtle though it might have been. But you're right. We all have our stories to tell, and you've interviewed fantastic. I mean, Gareth. I looked at Gareth's art, and it's amazing.
I know.
And
I ordered a
Deb's.
print. I
Oh
can't
my!
wait.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I would love to talk to that guy because David Lynch is a big fan of. I'm a big fan of David Lynch's as well. But and like Deb's show sounds fabulous,
Oh my
and
gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
And then
amazing.
Kristen Garavo talked about
I
you.
was
Like
about
she came to Indiana to see your show.
and that's because of Ridge House too. And Ridge House is a
Yeah.
great friend of mine.
Yeah.
And Kristen's play, I was fortunate enough to read an earlier draft of her script, and I can't wait to be able to see it.
Oh.
You know, and people out here in Los Angeles, Jeanette Yop and a woman named Nicole Rademacher. So we put together an art festival, the Celia Center Art Festival. And Celia Center is a nonprofit organization started by Jeanette, named after her birth mother. And there were 3 plays there. We had an art gallery, and Brianna Spencer did a spoken word thing, and so all this art by these adoptees, whether it directly had to do something with adoption or not, or they're just adoptees expressing themselves. So, all these local wonderful voices, and all of us have that. And if you just have listeners, if you just have it in you to just take a risk and start by putting something down on paper, even if it's just for you, and then if you feel like, hey, I want to release this and put it out, do it. I would highly encourage you because we need those voices,
Mm-hmm.
I learned about the original birth certificate thing. I didn't know that it was illegal for me to possess my original birth certificate. I got lucky. But these voices help fix that bullshit narrative that the world is living in,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I really think we're starting to wake up. I really, really believe that. And it takes our voices, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a keynote speaker, or whether it's art, because art reaches us in a different at a different level, a different emotional level. It kind of hits your soul. It digs a little deeper. And whether you say you can understand it or not, it hits you on that level that maybe words can't explain. And that's the power of art. And you're doing your podcast, that you're taking a risk right now, because you express, oh, I want, if is my birth mother listening right now, and what does she think? You're taking a risk by putting your voice out there and having a chat with another person who's taken a risk putting their voice out there. And that's what it is. It's I think Radiohead said, stop whispering, start shouting. It's get your voice out there. And whether your voice is through drawing, sculpture, paint, colors, dance, music, whatever it is, like, put it out there, man. Don't be afraid to fail. There is no such thing as failure. Failure. Samuel Beckett said something. I'm going to paraphrase this because I'm probably going to, butcher it. But he said, like, if you fail once, go back and fail harder. Like, do it again. Just do it again.
What a great call to action. I love that. Thank you. Okay. Well, I know we could talk forever, but that was like a great place to pause and switch to recommended resources. First of all, you are performing Blank again very soon. So can you tell us about that? Because people have to see it. I loved it. I loved it.
Yes. This is going to be an amazing event, you guys. It's Missouri, my home state, has finally opened birth records. State Representative Don Phillips helped push this bill through with the help of so many people. You know what? I probably shouldn't even single out names, because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people behind this in every state, that helped motivate this. So it's on January 1st, 2018, adult adoptees can request their original birth certificate without a court order. And so we are going to celebrate on January 1st in the capital of Missouri, Jefferson City. There's going to be some workshops. There's going to be a couple keynote speakers. Definitely State Representative Don Phillips will be speaking. And I think Adam Pertman will be coming. And people are going to be getting their birth certificates. So they're going to have groups. At night, I will be performing Blank in the capital of my home state. So I am thrilled and honored to be a part of this. It's going to be an amazing event, man. I my first show was 2010 in April. And now, almost 9 years later, I'm in my home state celebrating our adoptee rights. So this is going to be January 1st, 2018. Oh my goodness. To learn more about the event, it's called Breaking the Seal. If you want to come and celebrate with us.
I'm just breaking in because I want to let you know the website is MissouriAdopteeRightsMovement.com.
You can even just come and see the play. I think they're selling individual tickets to the play. I'm not taking any money on this. Everything they receive will go to their organization, which is putting on this event and which has obviously helped give us our right. So come see us.
Yes.
I also have it on my webpage, thebrianstanton.com. So you can also follow a link to get all the information for that. But it's going to be a party, man. We're going to celebrate the new year in an amazing way.
And you can bring your birth certificate and it won't be illegal for you to have it. Perfect.
I know. And I'm still requesting the original one. Just because I want to do it. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, I encourage everyone that is in the area, or if you're near enough to travel, please come and see it, because I was so moved. Yours was the first performance of its kind that I've ever seen really addressing adoptee issues. And so it was just incredible. Okay, and now what would you like to recommend to us?
Well, God, you have so many amazing recommendations, and they've all touched me in so many ways. A musician that I love, her name is Mary Gauthier. It's spelled Gauthier, but it's pronounced Gauthier. Um, she she's an incredible woman, man. Uh, Adopted, brought up in a pretty tough family, tough relationship with her father. She ended up running away, living on the streets, became an addict. And then she sobered up, became a chef in Louisiana. And then all of a sudden, like in her 30s, she picks up a guitar and starts playing. And now she is like a folk musician, kind of Americana. She's been compared, like people have described her as like the female Bob Dylan, but she wrote an amazing album called The Foundling, which takes you through her experience as an adoptee. And it's so raw and so honest and so amazing. And her voice is just raw. When you're listening to it, it's not fake, man. It's just beautiful. And when I first heard about it and I got it, I swear I sat down and I listened to the whole album straight through twice in a row. It was just so moving. And right now her new album is she wrote with wounded veterans, and they each had a say in the songwriting, and she put it out. But that's who she is, man. I mean, she's constantly trying to touch humanity and understand humanity and who we are in this world. And she's got that drive from adoption, really. I mean, I know that drives her, even though not everything is about that. It's about her life and who she is and trying to understand everybody else. And I would highly recommend it because she's a beautiful person and a beautiful artist. And music, music, it touches us, man.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what a wonderful recommendation. I definitely want to check her out. I know I already follow her on Twitter and stuff, but I don't think I've ever listened to her music. So I will.
Definitely start with Foundling because that's her story. And she has this beautiful instrumental piece about just her phone call with her birth mother, and she's just talking with her playing music behind it. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Okay. So if I need to feel some feelings, I will put that on.
Do it, girl, do it.
Well, thank you so much. Where can we connect with you online, Brian? You already gave us your website, thebrianstanton.com.
Yes, thebrianstanton.com. And I'm on Facebook. You can hit me up. I actually also have a blank page, which sometimes I forget about. In fact, I don't know if I've actually put the Missouri information on that blank page, but it's definitely on my homepage. So you can look me up, Brian Stanton, Brian Stanton. Yeah, and my website. We do our best to keep that updated.
Awesome. I will link to all of those things in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and being so vulnerable. I really appreciate it.
It's been fantastic. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Did you know I have a monthly newsletter? It's new. There's only been one so far. And I'm sending my next one in just a few days. And it's just going to be a place for me to share my personal thoughts with you and behind the scenes news of the podcast, what's coming up for season 4, all that good stuff. So if you'd like to be among the first to be in the know, you can sign up on adopteeson.com/newsletter. And speaking of behind the scenes, I wanted to let you know that season 3 is going to be 15 episodes long. So there's just a couple more weeks to go before the finale. This episode has been brought to you by my amazing Patreon supporters. Thank you for standing with me. Thank you for helping me to bring you these episodes each week. I couldn't do it without you. One last thing, I would like to ask you a little favor. Would you take the time to share this episode with just one person today? Perhaps you know of someone who was adopted in Missouri. They'd probably enjoy hearing Brian's story and learning about the newly opened records in their state. Thank you for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.
And you bleep out cursings too, I see.
I do. I do bleep cursing, and that can be the Derek Frank rule. I'll add that to my list.
That's great. I love it.